Please join me in welcoming Pastor Chris Wiley.
Thank you. When I was graciously invited by Collegiate University Fellowship to give this talk, I was given the title and nothing else. When I heard the title, I said to myself, well, that will certainly get some attention. I see that it has. Since I had nothing to work with but a title, I agreed. I thought, this will give me an opportunity to deal with the problem of language. Now, you may think this is off topic, but it's not. It's the reason that we have protesters here tonight. The problem of language won't be the only thing that I talk about. Soon enough, I'll get to one of the ways that motherhood can go bad. But first, allow me to take a little detour. The problem of language comes down to how things get named and the meanings those names convey. Communication is never easy, but it's gotten a lot harder recently. There's a long history to the problem. There's nominalism and the eclipse of Aristotle. Then there was philosophy's subjective turn with Descartes and those who followed. But of particular interest to me is what Paul Ricoeur called the Hermeneutics of Suspicion. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Atheists, including Marx, Nietzsche, and Freud, in the second half of the 19th century claimed that human beings are not really governed by reason. Essentially, we're animals, motivated by dark passions that seethe beneath the surface of what can be otherwise a calm exterior. And the most important of these is the will to power. Accordingly, people tend to use language to hide what they're really up to from others, or even themselves. That's why the suspicious should always be on the lookout for a scam. In its most extreme form, language can't even represent reality. It's just a tool, or worse, as Nietzsche said, a mobile army of metaphors, metonyms, and anthropomorphisms. It's a weapon to get what you want. When it comes to higher education, this is the way that many academics think about language today, and I'm sure that you've been indoctrinated into this way of thinking. If we Toxic matriarchy, the term toxic matriarchy is greeted with suspicion. I understand that we're playing bingo tonight. Well, I've looked at this and I know my manuscript, and no one's going to get bingo. I'm sorry. But anyway. So this is why I'm not surprised at the title, Toxic Matriarchy. I see that's a free space. That the title is greeted with suspicion rather than interest. This is what materialism inevitably gets you. I will. If we really can reduce reality to material and efficient causes, then even language necessarily is just one more way that the universe violently gets things done. It's not the whole story, of course, but that'll do. This makes genuine conversation, or what was once known as dialectic, impossible. Even in those benighted days when people actually believed that we have access to transcendent values, dialectic was a painful and imprecise process. But today, We're all like tourists who refuse to learn a foreign language and simply speak louder when others don't understand, all the while complaining about the stupidity and the mendacity of the natives. I'm afraid we've descended into Babel. But today, I am here as a witness to the possibility that words can help us see the reality outside our heads. And this is because in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That doesn't count. That's what? Oh, no. I didn't use the word Bible. Ooh. Nevertheless, speaking truthfully is difficult. And there's a measure of truth in the claim that people do bend the truth to serve their selfish interests. But we have a name for that, and that's lying. I will try my best to tell the truth. I'm not claiming that I will get everything right. We look through a glass darkly. We prophesy in part. But there will be a time for questions following the body of this talk. And if we have genuine dialectic, genuine conversation, maybe we can at least partially clear some things up. Now, please let me begin sort of the heart of my talk by reading from one of the great works of Western literature, Are You My Mother? This is, of course, by P.D. Eastman. By the way, I'm a children's author, and I enjoy children's books. But I can remember reading Are You My Mother when I was a kid, and I always thought it was a fascinating book, and I'd like to read some for you. As you can see, it's got some beautiful illustrations. And on the first page, it begins. A mother bird sat on her egg. The egg jumped. Oh, said the mother bird, my baby will be here. He will want to eat. I must get something for my baby bird to eat, she said. I will be back. So away she went. The egg jumped and jumped and jumped. Out came the baby bird. Where is my mother? He said. He looked for her. He looked up. He did not see her. He looked down. He did not see her. I will go and look for her, he said. So away he went. Down out of the tree he went. Down, down, down. It was a long way down. Here's the illustration. You can see it's pretty good distance. The baby bird could not fly. He could not fly, but he could walk. Now I will go and find my mother, he said. He did not know what his mother looked like. He went right by her. He did not see her. He came to a kitten. Are you my mother? He said to the kitten. The kitten just looked and looked. It did not say a thing. I think it was considering consuming the bird myself, but that always gave me the creeps when I was a kid, seeing that page. The kitten was not his mother, so he went on. Then he came to a hen. Are you my mother? He said to the hen. No, said the hen. The kitten was not his mother, the hen was not his mother, so the baby bird went on. I have to find my mother, he said. But where? Where is she? Where could she be? Then he came to a dog. Are you my mother? He said to the dog. I am not your mother. I am a dog, said the dog. The kitten was not his mother. The hen was not his mother. The dog was not his mother. So the baby bird went on. Now he came to a cow. Are you my mother? He said to the cow. How could I be your mother? Said the cow. This is an educated cow. I am a cow. The kitten and the hen were not his mother. The dog and the cow were not his mother. Did he have a mother? I did have a mother, said the baby bird. I know I did. I will find her. I will, I will. It looks pretty determined right there. Now, the baby bird did not walk, he ran. Then he saw a car. Could that old thing be his mother? No, it could not. The baby bird did not stop. He ran on and on. Now he looked away, way down, and he saw a boat. There she is, said the baby bird. He called to the boat, but the boat did not stop. The boat went on. He looked way, way up. He saw a big plane. Here I am, mother, he called out. But the plane did not stop. The plane went on. Just then, the baby bird saw a big thing. This must be his mother. There she is, he said. There is my mother. He ran right up to it. Mother, mother, here I am, mother, he said to the big thing. But the big thing just said, snort. Oh, you are not my mother, said the baby bird. You are a snort. I have to get out of here. Here's the illustration of the snort. It's a steam shovel. But the baby bird could not get away. The snort went up. It went way, way up, and up, up, up went the baby bird. But now, where was the snort going? Oh, what is this snort going to do to me? Get me out of here! Just then the snort came to a stop. Where am I? Said the baby bird. I want to go home. I want my mother. He's quite passionate about it. Then something happened. The snort put the baby bird right back in the tree. The baby bird was home. Just then the mother bird came back to the tree. Do you know who I am? She said to her baby. Yes, I know who you are, said the baby bird. You are not a kitten. You are not a hen. You are not a dog. You are not a cow. You are not a boat or a plane or a snort. You are a bird, and you are my mother. And they lived happily after that.
What kind of Bible was that from?
Wow, you can read. Awesome.
Some birds are homosexual.
I remember, as I noted earlier, reading Are You My Mother when I was a kid. You probably can too. It's been around for a while. It was originally published in 1960. Later, when I had kids, I read it to them. It's still remarkably popular. When I checked, it was number 530 on Amazon's bestseller list. Its humor, of course, is in the hatchling asking a cat, a cow, even a steam shovel, "Are you my mother?" And the joke is right there on the cover. The little guy perched on the head of the hound asking the question, "Are you my mother?" I suppose it's remained popular because even small children get the joke. And it's a great book for mothers because it affirms and celebrates the bond that unites a mother and her child. And it's a beautiful thing, one of the most beautiful things in the world. I think we all believe this. And it is one of the greatest consolations that a woman can enjoy.
That's woman's duty, right? That counts?
I think that counts. Ain't no end coming, bud.
That's remarkable. You don't believe that you were a consolation to your mother? Well, that's sad. And it's not made better by posting pictures on Instagram. The bond is precious because it's singular and exclusive. The only fame a mother can really know is in her own household. I suppose that I have just committed some form of microaggression. The notion that there is a natural connection between biology and motherhood that even a child can see means that some people can never be mothers, no matter how hard they try. In the Bible, we have a story of the first human mother. And in that story, we see that there is a connection made between the nature of motherhood and the name that she's given. I'm thinking of Genesis 30:20, which reads, the man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all the living.
Did you know the Bible's written
By the way, the name Eve sounds like the Hebrew for life giver, and resembles the word for living. Perhaps you object because Eve doesn't get to name herself. Not only that, she's referred to as she. But it gets worse. She doesn't even get a choice in this matter of being the mother of all the living, or even the matter of living itself. Yet there she is, alive without her consent, and filled with all that latent potency asked for or not. We're not talking about microaggression here, we're talking macroaggression. Just who gave God the right to create people without consent anyway? Obviously, I've reduced this to absurdity. This is what you're left with when you leave God behind. Today we're on the microaggression express, and I suspect that we will find ourselves with real physical aggression if we don't get off soon. But anyone can get off the train at any time. One way to do that is by considering the nature of gifts. Receiving things that you did not ask for can be hard. That's the way that gifts can be. Your given biology may seem like socks for Christmas, but the world needs socks, and so do you. And anytime you receive a gift, I mean really receive it, you subject yourself to someone else's will. And nature and names are gifts. Today, we have a difficult time accepting even DNA as a given. But according to the Christian faith, motherhood is a gift. And the name that Adam gave Eve is also a gift. And according to traditional doctrine of God's transcendence, God gets nothing that he needs out of this. This is gratis, an overflow of his goodness. And it should be received with gladness. Given this, what should we make of the title of my talk? Well, it is possible to have too much of a good thing. Take wine, for example. Scripture says that it gladdens the heart, and I can testify to the truth of that. But too much doesn't make you gladder, just the opposite. It makes you sadder. Ask an alcoholic or the relative of one. But wine isn't essential, you say, but I say it is. But for the sake of argument, I'll concede the point and proffer another liquid. Let's consider water. Now, you can't live without that, but you can have too much of it. People literally drown in the stuff. So there's my analogy, but does it really apply? Can too much mothering ever be toxic? Now, I'm a child of the 70s. We only had 3 television networks to speak of in those dark days, so even short-lived television shows had larger viewerships than some successful shows today. But one of those sitcoms that ran for only one season was called Hot Al Baltimore. The E had burned out in the neon sign. It was about a tenement house in, you guessed it, Baltimore, and it was filled with the quirky flotsam and jetsam that you can find in places like that, single, middle-aged taxi drivers, older widows, starving artists, those people. I've been a starving artist. I know what it's like. Anyway, one of those residents was a widow named Mrs. Bellotti, and she had a grown son, still in diapers, named Moose. Moose never came out of the apartment. He was just a mysterious presence upstairs from the lobby of the hotel where most of the action and dialogue took place. Occasionally, he could be heard stomping around accompanied by a laugh track. Psychologists would probably say that Mrs. Bellotti and her son had a codependent relationship. Considering the number of young men living in their mother's basements today, I don't think that many people would chuckle at this sort of thing now. But Mrs. Bellotti loved Moose to death. Her nurture was so enervating, she couldn't imagine Moose living without her. He needed safety, that and understanding. And like a self-fulfilling prophecy, she was right. He couldn't live without her. He couldn't do a thing for himself. The show lasted only 13 episodes, so we never get to see if Moose ever comes out. Considering the fact that it ended 40 years ago and that Moose may still be up there and Mrs. Bellotti is likely dead, Moose is probably having his daily needs met by a visiting care provider. Now, I've known mothers like Mrs. Bellotti, and they're not just women anymore, and I've seen a proliferation of Moose, and they're not just boys. And the very institution we're in right now is a kind of mother. Alma mater means generous mother. And I think it's a fine term. A university is like a mother insofar as she nourishes her children with knowledge. But when I was young, we made fun of people who never graduated. Klingons is what we called them then, implying that they clung to their mother's skirts. One goal of an education back then was getting strong enough to make it on your own. But I'm not sure that's what people intend to happen these days. Instead, we keep students safe from unwelcome opinions. Then they are passed on to other mothers, like progressive multinational corporations that promise to take care of their employees so long as they never go home. By the way, those make very bad mothers, often sacrificing their children on the altar of mammon. But more likely, the goal is for graduates to fall into the arms of the welfare state, which promises to care for us cradle to grave.
Maybe it's because the economy sucks.
Which promises to care for us cradle to grave just so long as we remember to vote for more come November. But it doesn't even stop there. I see men getting more nurturing, even without the expense of a sex change operation. Now men should be nurturing at times. I've got no problem with that. But nurturance has risen to such a high level that it's become the master virtue that all things must conform to. It is as though Adam had no nature of his own as a man. I can even see it clearly among clergy in ostensibly conservative denominations, and in the homes of young couples where some guys lack any sense that they bring something unique to their children as fathers. From what I can see, they aspire to be a second mother. You could say that in those homes, Heather really does have two mommies, even though one of them is male. Before going further, let's stop to remind ourselves about a couple of biological facts. None of us would be here without biological parents. A biological mother and a biological father. For some reason, there's a tendency to dismiss this as just biology. I think I know the reason. I think that when I think about the factual, the factness of biological let's think about the factness of biological motherhood for a moment. Women come equipped to bear and physically nurture children. There is the womb naturally. We all began our lives in one of those. Our mothers kept us safe in that space, whether they intended to or not. We were shielded from harsh realities. They even shared food and oxygen with us. I suppose you could say that this happened automatically, but I don't like the sound of that because it gets things backward. Machines mimic humans, not the other way around. But most of the mothers that I have known have been very intentionally pregnant, abstaining from alcohol, eating right. My mother told me that she quit smoking. But natal development does not stop after birth. Scientists... I guess I was wrong. Scientists have discovered that what goes on outside the womb for the first few years of life looks more like what happens inside the womb than we ever knew. I think that most of us assume that children appear fully formed and then just get bigger. But the insistence that you can separate a child from his mother right after birth without harming the child, as Socrates supposed in the Republic, is just wrong. There are biological developments that occur in an infant that only the presence of the baby's biological mother can help facilitate. And I'm not referring just to breastfeeding. This is one of those instances where the fact-value distinction, so precious to modern thinkers, proves to be untrue. The value of loving nurture is inextricably tied up with the biological fact of nature. But this doesn't mean that we must never separate a child from her mother. The health of both the mother and the child depend upon it. Over time, the bond between them must attenuate and, in a sense, break. It's only then that a new and healthy bond can form. And for this task, a father is often essential. Allow me to tell you a couple of stories. First story. I was present for the births of my 3 children. Now, in the olden days, they put men in the waiting room. It was a time when having a baby was like having an appendix out. Now, I tend to be hard on hippies. I confess it. But there are 2 things that I'm grateful to them for. One is the recovery of homeschooling. Before conservative Christians jumped on the bus, it was actually the hippies that had done the hard work of getting it running again and street legal. And the second thing I'm grateful to them for is they brought back natural childbirth. So I was there for all the grunting and the pushing and the blood, and I felt positively useless. I shouted the obvious push and held my wife's hand, but that was pretty much it. And then there was a baby. Then something happened each time that was very odd. I was presented the umbilical cord and a pair of surgical scissors. I don't know how this tradition got started. I suppose doctors felt bad leaving fathers with nothing useful to do. That's the way many meaningful traditions begin, by accident. I think it's evidence that human intentions aren't the only thing that gives the world meaning. But I recall the first time distinctly. I suspect that the doctor wasn't an enthusiast for having a father in the room, but it didn't matter. Traditions are traditions. And there she was, holding out the cord and the scissors. And in a flash, I understood, and I said, "Thank you." But my thought was, "You have no idea what this means, do you?" Then I cut the cord. I can still feel the sensation of slicing through that fleshy bond. I'll never forget it. Now for my second story. My church has a pretty good-sized youth group. And every summer for the last 15 years or so, 50 or 60 of us go down to West Virginia to help little old ladies with home repair and then take their grandkids to Vacation Bible School. Now, because we go back to the same neighborhood year after year, many of our people have gotten to know the families in the community pretty well. And our adults in particular have had a chance to see some of the kids transition from being children to being teenagers. I recall one summer, some of our leaders expressed their disappointment that all those years of loving on the kids hadn't kept them from using drugs or getting pregnant. There was even some talk about the futility of it all. Then a black young man showed up. He was charming and bright, and the whole team recognized him from years gone by. He told us that he would be going off to college at Marshall in the fall, and everyone was delighted. It seemed like, in at least one case, all that nurture had produced the desired result. But the next day, he came to drop off his siblings and inform us that he wouldn't be back. When asked why, he said, "My father says I shouldn't be going down to the church to flirt with those white girls from Connecticut." Naturally, our girls didn't know what to make of this. But I smiled and I said to myself, "I gotta meet this guy." And when I did, my suspicions were confirmed. He was a man, and a big one, kind you don't mess with. And he was seated at the head of a table with his family all around, like a miniature mountain over a verdant valley, and everyone looked healthy and happy. He reminded me of other fathers that I've known. In fact, many of the healthy African-American kids that I've seen over the years have grown up with a father like that guy. Now, I wouldn't be here today without nurture. Even now, when I'm hurt or sick, I need it as much as anyone. And as I get older, I know that I'll need it more and more. Nurture does its work by narrowing distances, by getting close, by feeling with, by giving care and shelter. But I think that there is too much of it today, and it's become toxic. The New York Times and Morning Consult published the results of a poll on March 16th entitled "Snowplow Parenting Scandal." Here are some of the findings. 76% of parents remind their adult children of deadlines they need to meet, including schoolwork. 74% made appointments for them, including doctor's appointments. 15% of parents with children in college had texted or called them to wake them up so that they didn't sleep through a class or a test. 11% of parents of adult children have called their child's employer if he or she had an issue at work. 8% of parents said they had contacted a college professor or administrator about their child's grades or problems that they were having. The result of all this help, of course, is helplessness. We're raising children that can't become adults. This brings me to the umbilical cords. When I cut them, I couldn't help but remember the Lord on the days of creation. Hopefully you can recall what I'm talking about. His Spirit hovered over the waters of the formless void. Then he made a series of cuts. He separated things, light from darkness, water from land, and so forth, and then he named them. Throughout the Bible, God is said to be holy, which means to set apart. And every time the heavenly choir appears, we hear that word over and over. Holy, holy, holy. And in Genesis chapter 1, we see the Creator distinctly, no blurring of the lines between him and the waters. He stands apart, and then the boundaries multiply. Holiness opens space. Because the Lord stands apart, so do you. You are given your space. But you're also given your nature and your name. These make it possible for you to know others and for others to know you. Natures and names are two things that we can lose when nurture goes too far. When that happens, distinctions get lost and things blend together. It's like falling back into the waters of the formless void. Years ago, I told my wife I have two jobs, to protect you from the kids and to protect the kids from you. I could see that wounded her. But I hoped it would be a healing cut. Today our kids are grown and healthy and my wife is happy. Now, here's where my second story comes in. Judgment calls for distance, and a life without judgment is a life without meaning. When a judge has a conflict of interest, we expect him to recuse himself. If he fails to do that, he compromises his judgment. This sort of thing is also applied to the professorate. We've set up tenure so professors don't have to fear losing their livelihoods when they teach unpopular things. In my second story, the father kept enough fatherly distance to exercise good judgment. He used it to hold his son accountable. Now, this could be overdone, of course, but you can still love your children when you judge them. And in fact, it is a peculiar form of love. We may not like boundaries, and we may not like standards, but they're essential for you being you and for you growing. Now, that particular father in that story I told lived in a neighborhood that was a sea of insanity. His boundaries were set, and his kids were healthy. I can't tell you the number of households and communities like that that can't say that. He managed to keep his kids dry. So that's my take on one of the ways that the matriarch can become toxic and what can be done about it. And here's where you get another bingo piece. Of course, patriarchy can go bad too, but you hear about that all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. About a half hour in, is it not on?
Yeah. You would go keep it off. Have a personal conversation.
You've been so good at it now. Let's keep it. About a half hour in, you mentioned that a man could be like a mother when he acted in a nurturing way. Why can't we hold fathers to the standard of being kind and caring, just as we expect mothers to be? This seems to continue lowering the bar for men while only increasing it for women. Fathers shouldn't be praised for being a good parent by the people who call motherhood toxic.
Well, a couple of corrections there. We didn't refer to motherhood as toxic. It was matriarchy, but as a technical difference. But I think my talk made it clear that I was not, writing off motherhood in any sense. So, and then the other part, the first half of the question about being caring, I think it's great. I think fathers should be.
Yeah. All right. You say that it's essential for a child's development for the biological mother to be present. How does adoption play into this? In particular, traditional adoption. No need to get into LGBTQ questions.
No need.
I'm just respecting the questioner.
Oh, so that was part of the question. That was part of the, right.
No,
Oh,
I was just reading the question,
yeah, so that wasn't his commentary.
not my commentary.
So anyway, with regard to adoption, I think adoption is a marvelous thing. I have many friends who have adopted children, and I encourage it. I was just recounting for you some results of some research that had been performed on, and I've got the documentation if anybody's interested in the footnoting, but it was an article that initially that brought this attention to me in the Wall Street Journal, and it was a review of a particular book. I've taken a look at the books. It's solid research. So essentially the research has demonstrated that what goes on in terms of the connection between a mother and infant after birth resembles, in other words, the kinds of development that occur in a small baby resemble the sorts of things that are going on while the child is in the womb, and it continues. And if that's interrupted, it does harm the child.
Okay, I think this may be related. If a biological mother is necessary for postpartum development, wouldn't it be preferable that an unwanted pregnancy be terminated than end in adoption? This is the line of your logic.
No, not necessarily, because if we can make judgments that are graded. In other words, this is not always a sort of either-or situation. Sometimes there are other considerations to take and keep in mind, and life would be one of those things that would be, so valued that we would be willing to do our best to help this child, even though there are some challenges.
And would you say that one of the divides, this is my follow-up question, is one of the divisions in our culture between those Christians who say that life is defined by God's pronouncement as opposed to our pronouncement about someone's
Right,
life?
sure, that's exactly right, yeah.
I was, next question, I was raised from birth in a loving Christian household. I attended religious schools for 10 years and was a devoted Christian until the age of 16 when I found my truth through a large amount of searching. I am now what I would consider an agnostic atheist. How does this transformation from a devoted Christian to an agnostic atheist through education and searching fit into your theory that atheists must be people who choose to ignore or misunderstand the Christian perspective?
Well, I didn't say that. What I said was that there's a certain kind of unfolding of the logic of materialism, and that unfolding of that logic of materialism, which reduces everything to matter and energy. In other words, matter and energy, that's it. Everything has to be explained within the parameters of those two categories. So necessarily language is simply a tool, or it's some kind of weapon that, for example, the guy with the kazoo, he's using that as a weapon and trying to interrupt, a line of thought.
So
No, I'm not going to continue. You've got a guy waiting for you.
That's a great. Don't continue. That'd be great.
Regarding the other half of the question,
Yeah, follow.
sure. Yeah, regarding the other half of the question, first of all, this is a person whose story is not over. I don't know where he's going to find himself down the road with regard to his intellectual journey. There's women make intellectual journeys too. So yeah. But there is a there are a number of people who eventually embraced the Christian faith who were atheists, but likewise there were people who had professed to be Christians who end up to be atheists. These things change.
Right. What exactly do you mean by matriarchy when it seems you have only been talking and arguing about an excess of motherhood?
That's exactly what I'm referring to, is a sort of controlling approach to caring for people that precludes risk, and it's intended to help, but it's by its nature it's an excess, and it prevents the kind of growth we're talking
Your
about.
working definition of the matriarchy that's toxic is too much of a good thing,
Right.
too much nurture.
Right. Yeah, and if someone came expecting a different approach, I understand, but that was my approach.
Can motherhood go wrong when two men raise a child?
By definition, as I noted, mothers are women.
Say again. I'm sorry.
Women can be mothers, but men can't be mothers.
You're supposed to answer the question, not just say
Well, I think he was making a sincere attempt to answer the question. Can motherhood go wrong if two men raise a child?
In other words, can two men over-nurture a child?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. Should women choose to seek fame only in their household, as Cyril Wiley says? That would be you.
Yeah, that's not what I said. I can read it again if you'd like, but the statement was a mother can only know fame as a mother in her own household. In other words, her children honor her and respect. It doesn't mean that she can't be famous outside the house for other things or whatever.
Right. The people in the house
know
her mother.
Know her, right.
Is there a difference between nurturing and doing everything for the child?
Well, yes, in one sense, yes, of course, because nurturance, in the case of doing everything for the child, becomes toxic and is therefore not nurturing. It's ceased to be nurturing.
That's the snowplow thing.
Yeah, right.
All right, thank you for speaking tonight. I wanted to ask if you think that some or all women have a responsibility to... The question disappeared. Could I...
You didn't say what you wanted to say.
No, it's a...
I guess we just lost the page.
We just lost the page. Sorry. Oh, here it is. It's the second one down. It moved down. Thank you for speaking. Moved up again. I was born in 1953. Thank you for speaking tonight. I wanted to ask if you think that some or all women have a responsibility to bear and raise children.
Well, some and all kind of covers everything. I guess the the point is it all right for some women not to have children? The answer is yes. Yes.
All right. My fiance comes from a loving family in which his mother is a successful computer engineer and his father is a stay-at-home parent. They are a beautiful Catholic family and they're functional, stable, and have raised 3 awesome kids. Would you make a clarification about what you believe regarding women being the head of the household? Do you have any comments on it?
Well, I believe in the biblical doctrines of male headship in a household, and in that particular instance, they're making some adjustments that make sense for them in that situation, apparently for income reasons, I would guess.
So you're not talking about who has what job, but you're talking about decision-making.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I don't have any, conviction that women can't have jobs outside the home.
Okay. Did you raise your daughter to not play outside late at night or not dress a certain way?
The answer to both is, well, when she was very small, we didn't let her play outside at night.
or on the freeway?
That's right. Right. Yeah. But no, there wasn't. My daughter is very bright. She aced the SAT. She was in the top 1% on both the math and the language. She's in college right now. She's doing great. Well, she had very conservative taste. I don't remember. I never spoke to her about it. Her mother, I know, probably spoke to her about clothing. But
all right. What is your stance on gay marriage?
I don't believe in it.
This is my shocked face.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
What is the relationship between religion and patriotism?
Well, it can work in different ways. I mean, I would imagine that patriotism obviously is love of country, particularly, trying to serve its interests and serve its good. There are times when a particular regime may be evil, and the most patriotic thing to do would be something that might not appear patriotic from the standpoint of the government's perspective. But in terms of religion, I think our religious convictions, Christian convictions, should encourage us to do good and to honor those in authority insofar as we can in good conscience.
Do you think, circling back around to the theme of your talk, do you think there's such a thing as toxic patriotism, toxic religion?
Oh, sure, yeah.
All right, next. I appreciate you saying in your lecture that you wanted to have a civil discussion. My question is, how do you view women who decide not to have children and want a career instead? Are they neglecting their purpose in life, according to you?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things I'd like to say in response to that. First of all, I've got many women in my church who work outside the home and do very well and have positions in different companies and things like that. On the other hand, one of the things that Plato said is, what is honored in the country is practiced there. And I've always thought that that's a very sort of accurate sort of take on why cultures and countries or societies tend to sort of see people pursuing a certain way of life. They know that this is considered the honorable way to live. And people who do not sort of follow that path are the people who don't receive the honors. And since we have a longing to be regarded well and be appreciated and praised, people tend to pursue, this path that receives public recognition. Okay. And in our society today, that's what most people, men and women, are encouraged to do.
Do you believe that in a heterosexual marriage, a man should command a woman?
The situation would have to be. I'd have to know what exactly we're talking about.
Right. He's a scientist and wanted to find out what would happen.
That's right. Right.
Let me rephrase the question and see.
Let me just sort of elaborate a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
So we tend to look at marriage and households in our culture today very differently than people in the past did. And one of the reasons we do that is because the household has been reduced to basically a recreational institution. It's a place where things don't really happen that are terribly important.
Right.
In the past, before the Industrial Revolution, the household was the center of economic life in the fullest sense. Now, when you go to work and your employer says, I want you to wear a hat, or I need you to be here on this, at this meeting at this time, you say, sure. at least if you hope to keep your job. And the reason you do that is because your livelihood and your well-being are connected to the welfare of this enterprise. It needs to be profitable. It needs to do things that it needs to do in order to, do what it does. So households in the past, because they were the center of the economy, there was a dimension to household life that people today just can't identify with, or most people can't identify with. So it just seems like bullying and controlling to use terminology like command or direct or whatever in a household environment. So immediately the mind goes to the creepy controlling guy and that kind of stuff.
Commanding his wife something about
crazy stuff,
the
right?
TV remote.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
As a entertainment thing,
right.
As opposed to we have to get the harvest in.
Yeah, something like that, right? Yeah,
right.
when the stakes are high, that's when authority really becomes absolutely necessary.
Okay, here's another. Let me follow this up
Sure.
with a related question.
You don't have authority because you're a man.
Can you elaborate on the verse, "Women be submissive to your husband, and husbands protect your wives"? That would be Ephesians 5, presumably. That they have.
Yeah, it's not an accurate. Yeah.
Right.
But it's if you interpreted it within the context of what I just stated, I think that it makes it's easy to understand the intent of it. It's what you have is a life in which the husband and wife have joined and have become one flesh. They have a common life, common interest, common good. They're pursuing this common life in a way in which it requires them to work together. That's the framework within which there's also a theological framework that reflects the relationship of Christ and the church.
Do you bring it down to what I think the questions are getting at? Do you believe it would be right or healthy if a husband comes home at night and comes in the front door barking orders?
No, that's not healthy.
Okay. Can we arrange to have the prize for the bingo thing be free Bibles?
That's right.
Do you believe? Of course, you can arrange to win bingo by typing in all those words on your question. Do you believe the Bible is a literal document, the literal written word of God, or do you believe the Bible is a living document that represents an idea? If you believe the Bible is a literal work of God, how do you reconcile some of the more barbaric elements of the Bible?
Well, that's an entire talk, and there are about 3 different elements to what was stated there. No, I believe that the Bible is God's word. Yeah.
Right. Barbaric elements?
Well, I think that we'd have to take a look at a particular passage.
Which one?
Yeah.
The Bible hated women.
I never read that verse.
So, if a man marries a transgender woman, who stays home?
Well, they're not married, actually, so...
Not married. So we're talking flip a coin here.
Yeah,
right. So why should people who are not Christian subscribe to the worldview you're peddling?
Well, because it's true. I mean, it's true, and there are ways to explain its truth in ways that a person who's not, reading directly from the Bible can relate to.
Right. In other words, non-Christians should not accept Christianity while remaining non-Christians. They should become Christians if they're persuaded of the truth of it.
Right. Sure.
Right?
Right.
Right. Okay, in an ever-changing world, do you find that there are problems with maintaining certain aspects of tradition? Example, men being the head of the household.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge challenge. Yeah. You know, this is where wisdom comes into play. You know, you try to make the best of things.
Why is the matriarchy a problem for the development of social and economic growth?
Well, I didn't get into that, and I'm not sure that I understand the question.
The questioner wishes you to add.
Right.
Okay. Why is so? I'm assuming why is maybe toxic matriarchy, as you discussed, a problem for the development of the economy?
I don't know. I've not thought about it, so I can't say.
All right. All right. So, we would like to thank all of you for coming. I appreciate it very much. I'd like us to thank Chris for his talk. Thank you.
Thanks.